remember during my yeshiva days, many years ago, one of the outstanding students was Norman Lamb. He was a little older than I am, but I knew him quite well. He later became eventually president of Yeshiva University, and he left many writings, many essays, investigation. The man was very, very, very capable. People used to run to listen to his sermons on Saturdays when he was the rabbi of the Jewish Center and other places where he served as a rabbi. I read in one of those lectures that he gave, he tried to explain the individual known as Samson, a biblical judge that is very famous because of his strength. This man could kill a lion with his bare hands. He was so strong. And he tried to interpret his life a little bit using the following. He said, how did the world come into being? It was through hitpashtut, some kind of emanation. Something came out of God that created the universe. But then the universe would have been infinite because God is infinite. So came another quality of God, which is tzimtzum, which means contraction. You put a limit to the emanation. You put a limit to the creation, and that's why you have a universe that has certain parameters. And he said this was the life really of Samson also. He was very strong, but he had to put limits to his strength. Samson was a Nazir. Nazir is a person that assumes certain obligations. He is not going to drink wine. In other words, he'll always be conscious of what he's doing and not get out of the limits of that. Can't use anything that comes from grapes. He won't touch a dead corpse. And he won't cut his hair. You know, his physical appearance isn't the most important thing. The most important thing is what the spirit is. So Samson was, on the one hand, extremely powerful, but on the other hand, he had limits through this process of Nazir. When is the downfall of this Samson? When Delilah cuts his hair. And as when he stops being a Nazir, then there's no limit to his strength. He already does not have the right parameters how to behave himself in this world. You want your son, a boy, to grow tall, robust. But you don't want him to be too tall. You don't want him to be a giant. You don't want him to be what we would say abnormal, outside of the limits of what we consider normal limits for a human being. You don't want your son to be 3 meters tall. No, you don't want that. Everything has to be put within a certain context. Our rabbi said, Ezehu Gibor, who is really a hero, a strong man? Hakovesh et Yitzro, the one that knows how to put limits to his passions, to his desires. And so it is in life also. You want to live comfortable life. You want to have enough money to take a trip and so on. But when you have too much money, it's also not so good, really, because then you start worshiping the money. You start worshiping the things. There was a president of Uruguay, I think his name was Pepe Mujica. He died not too long ago. He had a little Volkswagen, and he lived a very modest life. Even when he became president, he had possibilities of living much, much better. He said, you become a slave to your possessions. You have many things, and all you have to do is watch over them instead of living life. Well, you know, maybe his type of life was also in excess of limiting yourself, but you have to look for some kind of middle road whereby you live your life, but at the same time, you put limits to certain things. Because if you don't have limits, you really can't appreciate what you have. In other words, too much of anything, you stop really appreciating what you have. So think about it. look for things, try to better yourself in studies, economically, emotionally, spiritually, and everything. But remember also, you have to put a certain limit. The downfall of Samson was when he lost the limits of his strength.